So we're going to start with music, and today is our first work day after daylight savings. How you doing? Right? Spring ahead, lose an hour of sleep, just like that's what we need at this point in the semester is losing an hour of sleep. Oh, Diego, I love that. Do you have a favorite 80s greatest hits? Wait, I'm looking for my notebook so I can write it down. So couple of things we're going to do today. One is we're working on the vocabulary. And I thought one way that would be good would be to go through the redrawing pages, which have the vocabulary on them, go into breakout rooms, and most of the vocabulary has definitions that have been put on because they've been put on, and I have used different kinds of things. For example, this time I used a certain website that I copy and pasted over the definitions. So some of them don't have definitions on them, but when we get back, we'll be doing a vocabulary quiz, which will be really the greatest hits of vocabulary. So let me just show you an example of what I'd like you to do, because this is for the vocabulary that's due this week, which will not be on the quiz, okay? This vocab is, let me find the modules. There we go. This vocabulary is on our assignment page. Do you have a question? Hold on a sec. Okay, so let me just show you this. I'd like you to take a look at it, and I will screen share and get this page up. So this is the page for this week. So I will do an example of it. So this is we're all the way up to 1800. And even though it says this assignment will continue to inform your research on the costume design, you may choose to do your costume design for Lion in Winter, and hopefully you've decided by now, in a different time period than 1183. And remember, we talked about roughly a 200-year period is fine during that time frame because it is not as well known. We don't have it in our common vernacular. But now by the time we get to 1800, we're in 50-year increments. And there's even changes within that 50 years. So 1800 to 1810, 1790 to 1810 is really a sort of a little snippet. 1810 to 1830 is a snippet. And then as we move towards 1850, we're getting more into another period. So you want to pay careful attention to that. But here's a really excellent photograph. We can now work with photographs of real costumes on mannequins. So this is a dress that was made at that time, and you can actually look at these different details, and that's very helpful. And here's a gentleman. And remember that you can make them bigger, right? So that we can actually scroll in and see, notice the stirrups underneath to keep the trousers nice and crisp, the high-waisted trouser, cravat. But the reason why I say this is important is because you can then identify, based on these vocabulary words, certain things that are on that particular garment. So my idea for today would be to have you work in different assignment pages. So this assignment page is the 8th set. We'll work through the 7th set. That will be the vocab. And then even though it says of 10, you actually have a couple of extra redrawings so that you can toss one away, or you can make extra credit points if you do them all. Okay, so that you have actually a freebie of one sort of floating one so that you don't have to make all the points. It's a way to get 10 extra points. So we're going to have 7 rooms, and in there you may only be, let's see how many people are here right this second. And you will then go to a site and identify pieces by name and also by visual, okay? So we can look at, if you're on your modules and you're seeing my module page now, right? So here's the first assignment. And then, oh, no, sorry. I'm sorry, that is the drawing assignment. That's not the redrawing assignment. Let's go to the redrawing. Here's the redrawing because this has your vocabulary, okay? So then here's vocabulary that you pick out, which would be, oh, that's what I was going to show you. Pick out things that are, as we did before, without any helps. Pick out things that tend to be long lasting, or they may repeat in another time period. So in this particular garment, we may pick loincloth because we see loincloth repeating. We see tunic repeating. So you'll be assigned a chapter 1 through 7, and your breakout room will be numbered according to your chapter. And I'd like you to pick out the main terms with definition and then try and identify them on the drawing so that you can talk about them. Then what we'll do is we'll come back together. I'm going to give you, 10 or 15 minutes. We'll come back together and we'll create a whiteboard with those vocabulary words. That whiteboard will be published and that will be the words that you study for the vocabulary quiz. Does that make sense? Sorry, let me stop the share so that I see you guys in your little cubicles. It's like Hollywood Squares. I'm sorry, you guys probably don't even know what that is. So there may be 2 of you in a particular one, or there may be only 1 of you. When there is only 1 of you, you'll be in a site that has the definitions included. Or, okay, here's another way we could do it. There's 7 pieces. We could also do 2 chapters per room and you could have a PAL. Which would you like? How many of you would like a PAL? Raise your hand, and then we can just give you 2 assignments, and then, so, or how many, and so I have 1. Anybody else want to, I'm trying to, I should look at your hands too. Okay, yeah, I got your hand. Okay, and then, okay, all right. I think we've probably come up with more people would like a PAL than who don't want a PAL. So I'm going to put 4 rooms together. 1 of you will only have 1 room, and that's going to be ancient because that one does not have clear definitions with it. So let me go there. And we will assign you. So here you go. And so for now, can you see if you're in room 1, 2, 3, or 4? Generally, so let me show you. And I will get you. Okay, I'm going to have. Okay, let's see. And okay, so I'm opening the rooms. If you're in, you'll go to 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you can tell me now, can you tell what room you're in?
Yes.
So if you're in room 1,
Room 2.
then you are going to work on the Egyptian. If you're in room 2, you're going to work on chapter 2 and chapter 5. So 2 and 5. If you're in 3, you're going to work on 3 and 6. And if you're in room 4, you're going to work on 4 and 7. Okay. And I'll put that in the chat, and I think everybody can look at the chat.
Wait, I didn't hear for room 1. I heard you just say chapter 1 and then you didn't say another one.
No, because room 1 has chapter 1 only, because chapter 1 doesn't have definitions on it yet. Okay.
Okay.
Now, did everybody see that message that says room 1, chapter 1? Yeah. So then I'll put on the other ones and then we'll know. Yeah. So room 1 doesn't have pre-printed definitions. And that's why I'm trying to give you as much help as possible. So room 2, we'll
Okay,
do room
thank you.
2 and 5, chapter 2 and 5. And I can't do a, can't do a return or it will send it to you. So I'm just going to do room 3 has 3 and 6. So if you don't know your pals in your room, please introduce yourselves. Try to say something meaningful about how you got up this morning or how you didn't go to bed and or what you're looking forward to over the holiday. And here's the rest of the assignments. And I will come and visit each one of your rooms, okay? Would you like music? And you should be able to chat with me because I can see the chat. Are you having a lively discussion?
Cananukes, yes. We're trying to figure out how to say this word.
Yeah, you guys have a hard section because it doesn't have definitions and it's also unfamiliar because it's Greek terms and that kind of stuff. Which one are you looking at?
It's a long wraparound skirt with rows of fringe attached,
Okay,
canukes,
yeah. Let me see.
which, is also a skirt.
Yeah. Yes,
Well, it's
I
so
would.
interesting because this time period doesn't we read girdle on the list and I was like, they didn't have girdles back then. They didn't have any clothes. But then when you research more into it, it's like jewelry and elaborate,
Well, and also underneath Mesopotamia, girdle says tubular shaped, wrapped multiple times at the waist, ends hanging down. So basically it's a sash.
Okay.
So that then is something to key into because then that corresponds with what girdle does in the medieval period. Does that make
Right.
sense to everybody? Because you know how girdle is a confining,
Right.
girdle, it becomes a confining piece that will shape the garment. So what you want to do is pick the thing that is most likely to go forward or is the predominant item of the time period.
Okay.
So girdle is something we see over and over and over. And then actually, even through modern day, when it becomes a restrictive garment for the hips and waist, instead of just a controlling garment instead of an outside controlling garment, it becomes an underneath controlling garment as a foundation. So that would be the whole large definition of girdle, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other? So, yeah, I don't know how you would say that. It's probably some kind of, if we had someone of Persian descent, Hind might be able to help us say that word, which would be terrific. And we have a few people that, don't come to class in Zoom, but they are in class. And so it was great to be able to meet everybody. And I met them over the weekend again to do a one-on-one about their line in winter. So we could probably ask, but I'd say maybe it could be Kanakes,
Okay.
that could be one way to say it. And I'll try and look that up for you and come back. Okay.
Okay.
So just do the best you can. I'm going to go to another room and make sure they're working. Keep track of your words. If you do have more than 10, sort of prioritize them and then we'll put them all on the whiteboard. So someone should be recording it by writing.
Yeah, we have about we have about 12 of them right now.
Okay. And then be prepared to sort of talk about how they are related.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to go to, wait, I thought I figured. Okay, how are you guys doing on your words?
We got them.
So you're done. You have 10 for each of the chapters, and they're the dominant words that go forward into other periods or came from other periods.
Some of them that went into obviously the tunic's the one that's in.
Wait, I can't quite understand you, Diego.
Sorry. Well, the tunic. Our partner's almost halfway done. Are you done yet? Oh.
Wait, well, you guys are working together, right? Not you're each
Yeah.
working on your own, one on one chapter and one on the other chapter. You're working together on both chapters.
Yeah, I was just going
we're
over
working
it,
both.
which
Okay.
ones are the ones that are repeated.
Okay. All righty, sounds good.
Wait, are you talking about a word that repeat in both of the chapters you assigned us to?
No, but if you're working in, going forward from, what are you guys actually in? Are you in Greek and Roman?
Yeah, Greek and Roman and
And you go to Renaissance?
and then 17th century.
17th century. So you might find certain things that actually repeat. And one of the examples I was just giving was girdle.
Yeah, the
From
girdle.
Egyptian Mesopotamia repeats in Greek and Roman, but also repeats in Gothic or medieval. And then you can see it coming full circle to, it's a controlling garment on the outside of the garment to control shape. And then it becomes a shaping garment underneath the garment on a shaping foundation underneath a garment. Even in contemporary time, we have something called a girdle, but it's no longer a cord or a sash thing that's controlling the shape of the garment. It's controlling the body underneath the garment, right? So just think about stuff like that. How do things relate to other things and other time periods? And when we come back together, we'll talk about it as a group because each chapter is going to have a different piece of that. Okay.
All right, so what are we doing right now? We're just are we
You want to
gonna
get your very best 10 words from each chapter so that we can put it on the whiteboard for you to study for your vocabulary, which will be right when we come back from spring break.
any 10 words or just 10 words that repeat?
The best 10 words,
The best 10 words.
the most common 10 words, the 10 words that seem like there are a lot of words that won't stick in your head, but there are common words that repeat that you should be able to talk about and that you may need to talk about for your presentations. Okay.
Okay.
So it's those kinds of, we want to do work that helps going forward for all the work that we need to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Super. Okay, I'm going to try and go to another room.
All right. Okay, so 10 words that repeat.
Rather,
How you guys doing?
Matt.
doing well. We're off to the 18th century.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So I want you to think about your primary words and words that somehow may go from, are you doing medieval, Middle Ages? And then you're going to 18th century?
Yeah.
Okay. So think about it. Do any words sort of cross over or continue through the millennia, right? And
Yeah.
one of the words that I brought up is girdle, because we have that from ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, through Greek. It's a sash or a cord that controls the outside of the garment, until present day when it becomes a controlling foundation underneath the garment, right? So
Okay.
think about that. I think you guys might have things like chemise,
Yeah.
that would be continuing, and undergown, and see how things transition. Okay.
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 All righty. And I'll call you back in just a few minutes so we can whiteboard this.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Petticoat for this era.
Did we get what's on his neck already?
Oh yeah, the
The
cravat.
cravat, right? Yeah.
Cravat.
Cravat.
We're having trouble coming up with the name for his pants.
What period are you in?
We're the, I believe, 1800s. So chapter 7.
No. Isn't 1800s chapter? Oh, you're in chapter 7. Okay, yeah. You know what I think? I thought I said I wasn't going to give you chapter 7, but so there's a couple different kinds of pants, right? If you're looking at the site, the Canvas site that has the redrawing listed, there's breeches, which would be close fitting. There are knickerbockers, which would be loose fitting from the Dutch. There could be pantaloons, which would be slightly looser at the waist and tighter at the bottom. So you might also need to look in the earlier period and see if it's already been established. Because once we get past, so 18th century, wait, are you in 1800s or 18th century?
1800 to 1850.
Okay. So remember, in the last half of the 18th century, which would be 1750 to 1790, we've had knickers. We've had breeches that end at the knee. And then we had close fitting pants at the very end of that century in 1790, which would go all the way down and to the ankle. And then they could tuck into boots to the picture that we have today on our site. So there's just, you can look in the time period before, but you can call them breeches if they're close fitting to the body, and they could go into pants. And then you can look in your book. Let's look there and see what they recommend. Whoops, I'm in the latter half. Because
so-
things are going to start to repeat. They might just be called trousers.
Well, so they're loose at the top, but then they're tight at the bottom, and they go around the bottom of his shoe.
That's called, and that would be called a stirrup,
Stirrup. Okay.
right? A stirrup is the thing that's going to hold the pant vertical because they want it to be very tight. So whether it is tucked into a boot, they would have a stirrup on it so it would stay down when they put the boot on, right? And whether it's on the outside of the shoe, so they want it to still stay very vertical and the stirrup would go underneath. And then let's just see. The cravat is smaller, also a stock, right? Is another one of your neckwear pieces that's very, very common. It's just, again, a neckwear, something that's wrapped around. And you can say trousers, pantaloons are, trousers are tight, strapped under the instep, pantaloons tighter still and strapped under the foot. Breeches, which were often worn for riding. So those would be also long. They're actually in your book. This is interesting that they say this, but this is correct. In Scotland, they'd be wearing what's called the plaid, and it is a plaid cut on the diagonal. And remember when we talked about the diagonal, here's our over under for our woven. And when we cut things on the bias, they stretch. So when you get those tight fitting trousers and you don't have stretch and they're not knit, they're cut on the diagonal or the bias. And so the plaid would be cut in plaid, and plaid has name recognition for each of the Scottish clans. That's maybe a little more detailed than you need to get, but you know what? I think definitely one of the things you want to talk about is how there's so many words for what is worn below the waist on gentlemen. And then once we get into trousers in the 1800s, 1790 to 1800s, we're going to stay in trousers till today. And technically, you know, even though it's jeans, it is a casual trouser, right? And then how you doing otherwise? Do you need a couple more minutes? I'm looking at the clock.
I think we're pretty set.
Okay, I'm gonna just close the rooms then, and then we'll come back and we'll whiteboard.
Okay, perfect.
All right,
Thank
see you then.
See ya.
Taught. It's spelled A-U-T.
What's that, Sue?
Taught. You know, the taught word is
Yes,
A-U-T. To be tightened.
I have it. T-A-U-T. Okay, very good. Got it. T-A-U-T.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Okay. So our words are by chapter. I'm going to go through and clean this up, and then I will post this under vocabulary words on a page. Okay. Let me save it as vocab, and then we will be able to, you will be expected to know these words, and you can sort of ignore all the rest of them. Okay, so vocabulary words for TA 134. And let me go back to see you guys. Got to find you now. So on Wednesday, we will have a visitor for my evaluation. Ellen O'Connor is going to come. So you will see her in our Zoom session. And we'll do our regular meeting. We're going to do a color lab this week so that you can work on rendering over the holiday, and that I'll want to see some of your sketching. Okay, so be prepared to show some of your things from Lion in Winter after we've spent a lot of time on that, so that we can make sure that you're going into your holiday knowing what you're coming back to. Okay. And then the other thing that we have is deciding what is the historical period that you're going to work with for the presentation at the end of class. And I thought that I had already published that. Let me just see if it's
I think you did. It might be in
a
week
discussion,
8.
isn't it?
I think it was an actual assignment, but I don't believe you're gonna find it on week 10. I think it's listed in week 8, but it just has a week 10 deadline.
Yeah, so, but I'm right. I know I saw it today and now I'm not actually seeing it because I did want to bring up that I hadn't seen a lot of activity on that, and I will let you know that there are some things that we still, well, if I can't find it, I don't know why I could expect you to find it. That's my fault. So let me make sure I find this. The historical choice for the end of semester. Because we're going to
It's on
come
week
back and
8.
work on that. What's that?
It's on week 8,
Week 8.
right under the color media lab.
Okay, you guys are so brilliant. I love that. You are so much my hero. It's because I don't have things oh, here it is. Yes, definitely. Okay. So it's the deadline is this week. So let's look at that. I just want to refresh so that we know. Here we go. So picking your historical project. Okay, this is the beginning of the final collaborative historical project. We need to have you turn in your period from 1890 to 2010. Pick a 20-year increment so that you are interested in. Label them 1, 2, and 3. Determine 3 periods. List them in order of your preference so that you can be paired with someone who also has one of those 3 things on their preference list. Okay, because that way you can at least be assured of working with something that you want to work with. And it's due till this Saturday at 11:59 p.m. So please do that before Saturday so that you can go away to spring break with a clean heart, and then I can have all my grading done when we get back. So
I have a question. You know how last week we for the Line and Winter project, we had to have about 7 sketches, right? Do
hold
you
on a
know what
second,
we?
Diego. Diego, just hold that thought for 1 second. Let me
Okay.
continue this assignment and then we can go on to your question, okay? Because you're sort of switching topics right now. So let me just ask, are there any questions about this assignment that you need to select a 20-year period? So just select a 20-year period in here and then decide what you want to work with and say, I'll work with 1890 to 1910, or I want to work with this, or even a 10-year increment, okay?
Okay.
That way, we can pair you up so that you can get working on this collaborative project because it's going to be under a discussion. Any questions about this particular assignment? Okay, I just want to revisit things that we don't see for a long time because I want to make sure that nothing is missed. And I think you guys see it on the side of your homepage, right? You can see when upcoming assignments are due on your homepage.
Yeah, it'll like populate on the calendar. It'll show like a little agenda list if you have it
Right,
on that
okay.
setting, but
So I
it'll
don't
give-
want you to forget about those things. And then now, Diego, what was your question?
So you know how last week we did 7 sketches for the Line and Winter project. You know, it's not necessarily an assignment, but something we should have done by. Is there any of that this week? Like, what would you have us do this
Okay.
week for the project?
So here's the Line and Winter timeline. It's the class opted to have its own module for Line and Winter. So let's look at that. The Line in Winter module is all on its own, right? Just anytime you have a question about the Line in Winter project, which is due the week after we get back, here's where we talked about it. And we talked about the text or the play, and here is the project. So this is the timeline for that project, Diego, that you're talking about. Look for it on your modules. Here are the dates. By last Friday, you were doing rough sketches to find the characters. You are continuing your rough sketches so that on Wednesday, you should have 7 good rough sketches for me because we're going to start working with color. I'm giving you deadlines, although you're going to be turning this in at one time. You will be having your rough sketches. You'll have your color renderings. You'll have your dressing lists, your fabric swatches, and everything when you turn this in. Remember, here is our rubric. And this gives you your checklist, your historical folder with your 2 pieces for each character, your dressing list for the 7 characters, your color renderings for the 7 characters, and your rough sketches for the characters, your concept statement, your cross plot or organizational tool. You'll be doing an oral presentation about this. And for those people who are not attending the class, they're going to upload one in a movie so that we can watch it. You have the choice of uploading it in a movie, or you can do it in person over Zoom. But we will be discussing the oral presentation when we get back because we'll have a whole week to talk about it before the following Monday when these are actually due, which is April 5th. So that's why I want you to get your visual presentation, your concept written, your research, your cross plot, your dressing list, your rough sketches, so that your renderings will be beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's all right here in this module, the Line in Winter module. So there's your timeline. And here's the whiteboard discussion we had on it. And then this is the beginning. Oh, that's the recorded. Okay, sorry. So the module, right? So that's where everything about that is. So on Wednesday, color media, we'll be working with actually applying color. Get a couple of your sketches ready so that you can start applying color to something and see how that works. And we'll still also set up the mannequins, and we're going to work with fur. So that you can, a lot of people are choosing that kind of a period. So I want you to be able to have some practice doing fur. Let's take a quick 5-minute break. I know we only have 30 minutes left, but we didn't do a break yet, and I'd like to do one. Is that good for everybody?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I realized that the recording was not on for much of the vocabulary conversation. So when I will have to edit this recording, and then I'll put a note that says vocabulary at time code, and then try to indicate that since all of the vocabulary words and definitions will be listed on the page, that to work from the page, okay? And what I'll do is copy and paste those on there, or would you prefer them in a downloads fashion? Which do you like? Because if I put it on as a document, you can either open it as a document and see it on the page, or you could download it and then print it. I just don't know which is which you prefer.
I'm fine with either.
Either is fine. Okay, thanks. Okay, one thing that I put on the course, but we have never actually talked about in terms of the reading, is the referencing the painter list. That was a reading for week 7. And so I wanted to bring that up to you in our costume designer's handbook. Did anybody take a look at that by the way? So I find this book very handy in that it will give you some reference materials. And that's what I was referring to when I recommended you read this. But it starts with listing painters or costume designers. And then there's an annotated bibliography, should you like to have additional research books that you could look at, and some are by specific period. So for example, 1250 to 1350, which is in our line, many of you are doing Lion in Winter in there, could not find any extant garments in museums because they are too old. So extant meaning that it's existing from that time period of 12th century. But 1250 is pretty close. So we have some Italian painters that you could look up. And looking at a painter that is contemporary with the period is primary research. Remember, you want to stay grounded in primary research. And then to keep it from being an historical regurgitation of a particular primary period of a painter, you're putting it on your 20th century proportionate body, and you're making choices about what you see in that primary research. That's why I want you to look at primary research and look at more than one research image for each sketch, so that you're creating your own collection in your mind. What pieces of this character that I'm looking at fit my character of Jeffrey? What pieces of these three women fit Elise? Something like that. Does that make sense? I know that the period is hard to come by. So there are several selections here that you can look at. Sculptor and architect. There are Italian. Northern European artists did not sign their paintings, but you can look up these kinds of paintings and get the information, as well as from sculpture, as well as from actual certain things that are still existing. And we have seen some armor and chainmail and other kinds of things that are existing from this time period. So any period after that is easier actually to find research on. But I did want to call your attention to that because that's in your book, and your book is pretty handy about that kind of thing. Also, it talks about presenting your renderings as well for chapter 5. So, okay. Any questions about today and about the vocabulary review, which we did? And then you'll have your quiz, which will be an offline thing. So it'll be, I'll publish it and you'll have, 2 or 3 or 4 days to finish it, but it'll be the same kind of thing. It'll be open for a certain amount of time. And it will be probably a series of different kinds of questions. So there might be a matching section. There would be a definition section and maybe a fill in the blank. So multiple choice and fill in the blank. Okay, so it'll be kind of interesting instead of just, I always try to avoid multiple choice questions, because I actually had a boyfriend once that said, oh, I hate multiple choice questions. I don't understand them. So I just fill in the answers based on the design on the page. That's when he was doing Scantron. There's my design. So, I want to avoid having you just fill it in by the design on the page and that you actually read it. I think that even quizzes should be a learning tool and should be something that is kind of exciting and interesting and helps you along with your Lion in Winter project.
I have a question
Yes,
about the project.
yes.
So you said that you want us to start using coloring to our sketches. If we are using, like, let's say watercolor, do we have to draw our sketches on a watercolor paper?
That would be a good idea, because as we've seen in the last few times when we've worked with color media, when you start working with water and you're working, the surface of the paper accepts the water differently depending on the surface. So if you're working with typing paper, for example, or printer paper, it's quite slick. If you're working with 20 bond printer paper, it will have some tooth, which is the rigidity of the paper. It's not only the rigidity, which gives it more body, but it also has the surface quality, has more texture to it. Okay. Watercolor paper has a lot of texture to it. So on Wednesday, you want to be experimenting with watercolor paper. if you can put a sketch on there so that you're actually painting on something instead of just putting your colors down, which is what we had, we've done that exercise already, then you would learn more information about how you're going to complete your rendering. Okay, so whatever kind of paper you're going to use, or if you don't know what kind of paper, this is the perfect thing to do. Be sure that you have your sheet, your color media sheet. Remember, we made the color media. Where you have your color and it's labeled, you know, it is turkey red. And then this is fuchsia. And then this is petal pink, or whatever your media is. So if you're working with color pencils, right? You remember we did this page. So you really want this, your color media descriptions on Wednesday. Bring those. Bring your actual color media. And I know we have some with watercolor, some with color pencils, and some with oil pastel. Okay, so you'll want to have all of those represented. And do we have any other color media other than those three? Because I want to make sure I'm prepared with those. So this is what we worked on in a lab that you uploaded. You definitely want this because this was also mixing, right? Color mixing. So all of your information about your media is here. So that when you get to the rendering portion of it, you can say, oh, look, I put this on and I put it on with a heavy hand so it's more opaque. And I want to back that up so it's see-through. So these are things that we talk about, opaque. That is not see-through. I don't want to see through it. I want it to be thick. So that would be like your velvet. So if you have your swatches, and even if you're not going to paint your character sketches, but you have your swatches, then you can work on a rough, really rough sketch and say, I'm going to need to know how to do velvet. And this is how I'm going to do a velvet cape, right? So that we can see how you're going to do that with your color media, with that particular swatch. Or are you doing something that has a light and dark quality? Does it have a pinstripe? What does it have to it? So this page that we worked on, where you have each one of your color media sampled on your page with water or some other way to move the color around, and then you color mixed to either the secondary or the tertiary colors, and you did your values, so you know light to dark, and you know cross-referencing to your complementary color, extremely important. Because then when you need to start adding color to your rendering and your sketch, you have a basis from which to go. Does that make sense to everybody? So this is really where we're going to live on Wednesday in color media world. I will check in with you and make sure that you have something. So make sure that you have a sketch that will accept your color media. So let me just say here, choice of paper. So that's your color media, your swatches, and your paper. And you might want to work with a couple different things. So you can work with printer paper. A paper called Bristol board is very slick, but you can do watercolor on it and it will move around a little bit. And maybe that's a good thing. And then you may want to have something like I used, which was, you know, our friend the Sharpie, so that you can create your sketch. And if you need an extra line or two, you can use a Sharpie. What's an advantage of a Sharpie? Anybody? Is it in the
It's pretty
chat?
dark,
It's can be, well, they come in all bunch of colors, by the
but
way.
like most of the time it tends to be something dark that like is hard to necessarily cover up.
Right, so Kit uses gouache too, so if you want to use gouache, that's fine. So here's the thing about Sharpie that's really critical. Permanent marker. Because you don't want to have something that's going to move around. So if you want to do a line on something, you don't want this to move around afterwards. You want it to be stick there, right? And you might find that you're going to paint everything and then you're going to go over and emphasize something, or you're going to put your more graphite on, or you're going to do something like that. Okay, so you want a Sharpie or some kind of a pencil, a graphite pencil that's sharp that you can make a line with is really great. And yeah, if you do your sketches on printing paper, you can see what that's going to work. You don't necessarily have to redo them on watercolor paper, but if you've done them on printing paper, and you love them, what I would suggest is that you make a copy of it, so that you can either do a Xerox copy. You can go to, if you don't have one, if you can't make a copy on a printer at home, you can go to Kinko's and make a copy for just a couple of cents. Make a few of them so that you can just make a lot of color choices and see what works. So it's experimental. This is all experimental, because if you haven't yet done this before, you're trying to have the best representation of the swatch to the sketch. Okay. And so you want to put your swatches down. Now you don't have to have your swatch really defined at this time, because you want to make sure that you have enough swatching materials for the last project, which is Midsummer Night's Dream. But you just want to be able to know where you're going. And then if something works out and you think, oh, this is maybe better for this swatch, then, you know, happy accident, take advantage of that. Okay. And other questions? So one of the things that I'm really trying to have you work on with this project is that you keep the project moving at the same pace. So you keep all the characters moving. And why do I say that? Because if you stop and you draw one character and then you decide you're going to color that character in, and then you do each one of them one at a time, by the time you get to the 7th character, you will be so much better. You will have so much more practice that the 7th character is going to look monumentally better than the 1st character. So whatever you had last week is really considered a rough sketch. What we want to do is have this experimentation that we're going to work on Wednesday. And we want the figure to be positioned on the page. So that here's your page, your figure is going to be positioned. That's why we did the line, but your figure is going to have good positioning on the page. So that doesn't mean necessarily in the center, but maybe you're going to put him on the side. Right? You might put them over here because something else is over here, but the page needs to be balanced. So you want to work with creating your figure so that the page is balanced. So the figure is either in the center, or it's on the side and balanced by something else, or has a little shadow, you know, on the bottom and figure. But what you don't want is you don't want your figure up here and then a bunch of blank space down here. Same thing, you don't want your figure to be here and have a big head and then a tiny body down here. Okay, so you want to figure out where your figure is going to go on the page. That's why we did those rough sketches. That's why you have that incremental drawing with the scribble guide, and you can use that. So if you want to put that on a paper, but you haven't selected your paper yet, then you want to do a number of different paper choices here. And like I said, you know, you can work with, I've seen newsprint and poster paint be extremely effective. So it doesn't need to be something that is elaborate or expensive, but something that serves your purpose. You can use brown paper bag. That's actually quite absorbent. It has a lot of tooth. You can work on the inside of it. It's rigid. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunity to figure out what kind of paper. If you're feeling adventurous, you can go down to an art store. There are a couple of them in Santa Barbara. You can even go to Art from Scrap and see what kind of things that they have there. It's always I find it very inspiring and very fun. But you can go to the art store on Victoria, or you can go to Michael's or whatever. I find Michael's not to be as inspiring, and just touch the paper. And I, you know, I go like this. Huh. What that feels like. So if you're working with pastel, you maybe want to use Canson pebble paper. You know, there's all kinds of things, not too much tooth because it'll grab the color too much. So just think about what you might want to do. Questions on that? I was just thinking you can paint on muslin. I mean, you can paint on anything. Muslin's a little harder to control because the rag content talks about rag content is the amount of cotton fiber in the paper. So the more cotton fiber in the paper, the more absorbent it's going to be, and then the more your watercolor can move around. If you want your watercolor to stay pretty stable, you want to pick a different color paper. So you do want to experiment with that a bit. And you can buy one piece of paper. You don't have to buy a tablet. You don't have to marry yourself to some end product. But one of the things we're doing with Lion in Winter is having you do some paper discovery so that when you decide to do A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is our last final project, you've got some bells and whistles to work with. Okay, final thoughts? So Wednesday, right? Bring your color media sample board that you've already done with color mixing on it. Your color media, swatches, paper choices, a Sharpie, your water containers, at least 2, your brushes, if you're using that. Any final thoughts? I will try to get the vocabulary together and publish it before Wednesday so we can all look at it. Okay? Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Great work today. I thought the
Thank you.
vocabulary was very important. It gave us a chance to sort of look at each of the assignments that we've done so far and look at important words, and I'll see if we've missed any, or, you know, if things make a lot of sense. We should, from our words, be able to address somebody so that you have enough language to go forward into your presentation and to be able to talk about it. Instead of saying, well, that thing he's wearing, you can say that gown, that tunic, that dalmatic, that whatever he's wearing, the tabard, the chainmail, so that you're using specific terms for the garments. Okay, questions? Then I will see you on Wednesday and we will have our guest.
I do have a question about the presentation. You went over this, but I kind of forgot. The oral presentation, it's going to be on Zoom, or do we turn it in like as an assignment?
You can do both.
Okay.
If you turn it in like an assignment, then we can play it in class on April 5th. But you can also do it in class live. So you
Okay.
have an option. Some people who are not able to attend class because they've decided that this is an online class for them and they're listening to the lectures, they will do theirs as a recording. Okay. So you have a choice, and we will talk about that when we get back. We will do presentation practice. So there will be no mysteries.
Okay, thank you.
Of course,
Thank you.
of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Okay. Sam, are you still here?